All right, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for joining and taking the time out of your day to join us on the next series, or the next episode, I should say, of the live series Roundtable events. Now, this is something we've done for a number of years now, and then we've recently stepped more into in-person meetups. We want to ensure that whilst I'm not in Copenhagen or not in Stockholm, these things don't stop. So today I'm joined by 5 of the top engineering leaders from across Denmark. I'm going to give them a very brief introduction, but I'll get them to do a bit of a more in-depth kind of bio on themselves as we go along. We have Konrad, who is currently Senior Engineering Manager at Vivino. We have Kevin, who is currently Senior Engineering Manager at Medable. We have Mikkel, who has just finished up as Senior Director of Engineering at Tradeshift. Galina is Senior Engineering Manager at AP Moller Maersk. And last but not least, Klaus Peterson is Senior Manager of Frontend at Salling Group. So, Klaus, I came to you last there. Would you mind doing the first introduction? Just give us a quick run through of you, who you are, your position at the moment.
Most definitely. I'm Klaus, and as mentioned, I'm a senior manager for the front-end team. I currently manage a total of 17 engineers, only in the front-end. Out of that, I have 2 team leads, so kind of manager for managers, but also not fully. And then I have a tech lead. I've been in engineering management for 3 years only, so this is still fairly new compared to some of the more senior people we have here.
Perfect, thank you very much. Galina, we'll come to you next, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So I am Galina. I grew up in Russia and have my computer degree back from Russia, and that's also where I started my career. And then I moved to Denmark to work as software engineer for Microsoft, and did it for many years. Also worked on many different domains, and eventually I moved to management role, to leadership role, and now I'm in Maersk. I have 4 teams, including some vendor teams. The teams are distributed between Copenhagen and India. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome, thank you very much. Mikkel, you next, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Mikkel Cauchi. I've been working 7, 8, 9 years as a developer, and then I have about 15 years experience in different management roles. The latest one was in Tradeshift, where I recently left. It was a senior director role. Had about 60 employees distributed on 12 different teams. I'm starting at a new position on November 1st, also a director position in a slightly different company, much larger company, in a director role. So yeah, I guess that's the short version.
Awesome, thank you very much. Kevin?
Kevin. I've been working in software professionally for about 16 years. Done a bunch of different things like PHP.NET, web backend, and eventually specialized in Android for a long time, and transitioned into leading a small team, being in charge of a product that was a web app, and then that eventually turned into a management role about 4-ish years ago. Currently working with Medable. I'm managing a smaller team of about 5 engineers, and combining that with also being the tech lead for that team. So that's short.
Perfect, thank you very much. And last but not least, Konrad, we'll come to you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Konrad. I'm currently a senior engineering manager, as you said, Jamie, at Vivino. I've been there for 6 years, but started as an individual contributor, iOS engineer specifically. Have done that path for a number of years, and then transitioned into my current role as a manager. I am part of a cross-functional team where we work on our new premium subscription product. And we have 7 engineers as of now, soon joined by another next month. So 8 engineers cross-functionally across various platforms. And yeah, super exciting to be here and then talk about coaching.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, leads us onto it nicely, to be fair. So now that we've all got a bit of an understanding of kind of who each other are and what our current positions are, I think it's time to kind of really kick on with the conversation. So this is something that came up a lot when I was in Copenhagen a few weeks ago. We did a management meetup there, and a lot of people were talking or asking for kind of ways in which they can, coach their developers and some successful methods they've had. So I thought, what better way to talk about that than on a roundtable event. So I guess the first thing that I wanted to cover really is, obviously we can keep this specific to software engineering. I'm not looking for any advice on football coaching or anything like that, because I definitely need it, but it's not the time. But in terms of software development specifically, what is coaching to you? What do you class as coaching, and what would your definition of it be, essentially? Anyone feel free to jump in now, by the way, it's a bit of a free-for-all.
Yeah.
I can start. Oh,
there you go.
Konrad, you want to go?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I can kick it off. I was thinking a lot about it actually before we met, and to come up with some sort of single sentence what I think maybe coaching is to me, and I think that the way to summarize that we can then talk about more is that coaching to me is to facilitate a problem-solving process for another person. And that could be potentially any problem, right? Of course, we're going to talk more about this in context of engineering management, but that could be anything. We also there for our team as human beings, and I want to help them with whatever problems they may have day to day. So yeah, I think the facilitation around problem solving is what coaching is to me in a nutshell.
Cool. Any advances on that?
No, I totally agree. I think that's a good definition. And maybe then to bring it into where it gets a little bit more specific to the engineering leadership space. I think there's definitely some things to be aware about, which is like the definition that you kind of put forward or description, Konrad. It's also, I guess, also kind of reached into that where it's kind of a neutral thing. You're supporting, you're facilitating. Or trying to get something out that's already, or knowledge or something that's already in some way there in the team that you're kind of facilitating it to come out. And of course, then when you hit into for like it is for all of us here, where you then combine that with a management role, where you actually, so there's like some different aspects that comes into it. Like one is you actually have a vested interest in where this team is going. I mean, you had your hands in the soup yourself. I mean, whatever they decide to do, it also comes back on you. So I think that's one important aspect too, when you kind of combine this kind of leadership and with coaching techniques. And the other thing is the kind of the power stance, that there's always a power relation going on between you and the I mean, unless you have some construct where you kind of coaching members of a different team in a different department, you might get out of that. But in kind of the day-to-day situations, you need to really be careful and consider that kind of power stance, or that's always at play as well. Yeah.
I agree with that, and I think it's both, like what have been mentioned about that being part of kind of helping developers to grow, helping to progress in the organization, helping to do the best at their work, which in some cases also including like helping them with some their personal issues or something like that. But I think it's important to look at it from perspective of organization. And a lot of organizations now consider coaching like as one of the best ways to impose a company culture, company values, and that can be done as well this way. And that's one of the most successful tools to succeed on that path as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Like when I was thinking about this before this conversation, I was also, I was thinking about what does it mean to, be a leader in the organization, and I was trying to figure out like what is the definition of coaching for me, and I think there's a few different aspects and a few different like approaches to this, and like there's mentoring, which is useful to unblock someone, like sharing advice, sharing knowledge and experience. Coaching, like asking open-ended questions that people reflect, like that's an important part of it for me. And then sponsoring, where you give people an opportunity to grow, give them visible, valuable work, basically. And I think those are three important aspects of it, like we're discussing today. And I think a great moment for me, like from a coaching perspective, is when I'm in a conversation with someone and I ask them a question and they kind of lean back and say, "Huh, I hadn't really thought about that," and then give it some deeper thought. I think that's important for me in coaching.
Awesome. Klaus, have you got any advances on this, or is everybody stolen your answers already?
I think everyone has got it pretty much covered. I see coaching is a difficult word, especially these days, I think. And I see it more as like one of the ways you can unlock people's potential. Like if it's individuals or in a team basis, I think that really comes down to what methods to use. I think I see coaching more as a broad term of trying to help everyone improve. Maybe that's also not the correct interpretation, but of course, everyone to their own way of seeing it, I think.
Yeah, and that's what we've pretty much gathered here, right? From the first 5 answers, we've had 5 kind of similar, but also very different answers in some ways. So it's not a one size fits all scheme, right? So I think one of the really cool things that was said there is that how it can be used to help impose company culture as well. Such a big thing, especially a lot of you here are working in quite large businesses. You want to make sure that new kind of joiners to the team are able to pick up on that, and then I guess also it can also be used for internal promotions, right? If you're struggling to find a leader or somebody for a particular position, coaching can be an effective way of being able to kind of shoehorn somebody into that new position in the team. A good point I think to come to next is almost in your position as a manager or a leader, how do you spot gaps in knowledge or spot areas in which people are struggling to identify that some coaching is actually required? But what are some of the ways that you have found success doing that previously? Well, I've put everyone on the spot now, haven't I? Apologies about that. But
I can say something like maybe it's different for me than for some other people, because I'm also still, like as I mentioned before, like I also work as a tech lead in the team, and then so I'm very close to the code still. So it's in like when we're talking about software engineering specifically, like being involved in the MRs or PRs. And reviewing code and talking about architecture with people, like that helps at least spotting, technical gaps, and that makes it easier for me to do that at least.
Yeah, so more kind of about being close to the developers. And I know a few people in here have mentioned that they're kind of leading or managing managers almost. So even if it's not from a coding perspective necessarily, how do you kind of spot maybe issues in the way that they're managing their team and things like that?
I mean, it depends a little bit how close you are to the team, and what kind of. So the position that I have for the last couple of years, I've been kind of pulled back a little bit. So it's but I mean, I do interact directly with the managers of the teams and the leaders of the teams. So a lot of it, I mean, or a big part of it is that I have a strong connection built and a strong management team where we can discuss openly about problems and challenges. And then there's of course also the kind of what I guess you could call it the output control things, where you're participating in kind of in observing what are the team deliverables, trying to take part in these like different like the sprint reviews, even if I'm having kind of a drawn back role, and trying not to come down too hard during those sessions, then it's still kind of valuable input to how the vibe is, how things are going, how's the delivery coming, is it the good conversations that you see in the teams, and then bring that up with the team lead or manager at a later point.
Yeah, I think I very much agree. It comes down to a lot of communication and observing also how people communicate within the team, to spot, whatever may be not working. So that coaching kind of, grows maybe outside of the one-to-one relationships sometimes, and it has to do with the entire team as well. But communication is key, and understanding also why people communicate a certain way, what they may mean for them personally. Yeah, a lot of communication and teamwork.
I agree as well. It's a lot about communication and observing others people's behaviors, and also reflecting on what you see, like being an active listener and reflect on what you listen, or active watcher, right, and what you see. I also think in big organizations, there are some processes that helps you to get this feedback. So some annual review processes or quarterly review processes that all people go through. And as part of this process, there is always about collecting feedback, asking your peers, asking other people, managers, like whoever you communicated with, to provide the feedback. And a lot of good ideas, suggestions, observations come from those like more official processes as well.
I also feel like, when you asked about knowledge gaps and things like that, this is maybe where we're touching upon mentorship as well, that Kevin mentioned earlier. There's maybe a fine line, but there is a line between coaching and mentorship. And I think also it's important to understand the line when are you actually trying to coach somebody and when trying to mentor somebody, because methods may differ a fair amount.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, to be fair, because I was going to ask you myself, because like you said, it's a very fine line. There's probably a little bit of a grey area that's a crossover between the two. How would you separate them? What do you think is the difference between being mentored and being coached?
To me personally, I think coaching is more about asking the right questions and active listening, and sort of letting that person, figure it out for themselves in the end.
Okay.
So that, it's a very powerful process to go through. And so any guidance or knowledge sharing or experience sharing, that's where you're touching more of the mentorship realm. So I guess that's more like listening is coaching, and talking is mentorship, right? To put it simple.
Yeah, I think mentoring is a bit more like directive in a way. Like you're sharing advice, trying to unblock someone or onboarding someone to the team, or sharing knowledge and experience. Yeah, like Konrad summarized nicely. It's more about talking. Yeah,
more of a hands-on approach, I suppose, isn't it, as opposed to coaching, which makes sense. So I guess when it comes down to, let's say you've identified an issue, that, you've realized that maybe it's a manager who's not communicating with their team effectively, there's a developer in the team who's maybe struggling to communicate internally, or it may be just a hard technical issue, somebody's really struggling with a certain part of their role. What are some of the chosen methods that you've adapted in the past? Where have you seen the most success in terms of being able to take someone who's struggling and help them get to where they need to be?
I think then it is as the other folks here said, then it is actually super important to realize that maybe coaching is not always the answer, or it can be like one tool that you have in the box. I guess if you're looking at a whole team, so like even that in itself is a bit problematic. So I thought that the headline was actually quite interesting. Like, how do you coach your team? Because I read it first as like the team as a whole.
Yeah,
this is an interesting concept. But anyway, when you, it can I'm sure that it can be done, and is being done in group sessions as well. But when I look about or when I look at a team and saying like, what are my levers? How can I control, or how can I influence this team without kind of taking over and getting mixed into all the details? Then I like to look at it from different angles. Like you have the process angle. I can go in and help with finding out how the team should work, and say, well, if we work in a certain way, then we can expect that things are on the right track. Or you could look at kind of input-output control. Like you make certain resources available in terms of like developers or hours or other kind of resources, and then you can you expect a certain output. So you can kind of then set expectations about, we expect this output at a given time, or and then kind of use that as a way to kind of steer. And then there's the last one, which can be quite powerful, is the kind of the culture. So that you can kind of, by asking the right questions or promoting the right behavior or rewarding the right behavior, or you can kind of that can also be a handle that you have. And I actually found it super interesting that Galina was saying about using coaching as a means to kind of communicate or spread a desired company culture. And I would actually really like to hear some more about that if we can have time to get into that.
I'm happy to do that if you are, Galina.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of big organizations, and probably small as well. It's just I recently worked in more big organizations. They now realize that coaching is one of the paths to achieve people's job satisfaction, to reduce retention rates, and to impose company culture, like in the most maybe nature way. So in Microsoft, the 3 expected behaviors from manager, they are formulated this way. It's model, coach, and care. And it's similar in Maersk, in my current organization where I work. And then you're like, as a manager, you're supposed to model, like to show the company values. And you're also supposed to kind of coach your teams similar way. And the fact that you model it yourself like helps as well during coaching. And then, yeah, it's a lot. How do we do conversations? How do we, I don't know, maybe first like agile, not agile approaches, right? So which questions do we ask? Like building a culture of trust. All of that, like, is part of coaching, can be achieved through coaching. And I think also to reflect on what you were saying, that do you coach individuals or do you coach teams? In some cases, you need like a combination of this. And then some of the processes that you can set up. So like majority of the teams that I know follow some variation of Scrum, where like a regular retrospective, like other variations of Agile, where regular retrospective are done. And then that's always the place where you can do coaching and like with the team together and work with them like to resolve different type of issues.
He's happy.
Yeah, I'm happy. No, and I think I think you're actually right that that if you're doing some kind of agile, the retrospective can be really powerful instrument. I also find that that you can, if you I think it was also you, Konrad, saying by asking the right questions, you can also. And I know now we're kind of maybe sliding into is it then pure coaching? But by asking a certain type of questions, you can also kind of gently nudge the team to have to pay attention to different areas that you feel is necessary without totally kind of destroying the team autonomy. And the retrospective can I think a lot of places the retrospectives are not used to the full potential. I mean, you can, so it's very often you see these like super generic models. What were you happy about? What did you loathe? And then what should we continue? And then you kind of tend to repeat more or less the same conversations every time. Where I think it's quite interesting to experiment with saying, well, I as a leader or manager of this team or in the area here, I see that this team could need to reflect something about like why are we not delivering as much as we could, or maybe we're facing a super important delivery or at some point, or maybe there's some interpersonal problems, and that you can actually actively by saying, well, today we're using this retro technique, and by asking the right questions, you can kind of notch a lot in a desired direction.
I also absolutely agree with the retrospectives. It's a great tool. I think also it is pushing your team a little bit to be more vocal. I don't know. We're dealing with engineers, right? Many of them like to code and then be in their zone and not really maybe talk openly so much. But just nudging them a little bit, by setting a certain format over a retrospective, and then asking a couple of questions, and maybe waving through the silence that's in the room for a little bit. Then you would definitely see eventually people open up, and people have opinions, and they may that may be something that builds up over time, and never get to talk about this. And I see this happen a lot. Right, so definitely a powerful tool to use.
And just to add on to what Konrad was saying, I think the listening part is so big in all of this. Sometimes I've had people come to me with issues that we can't necessarily resolve. Maybe it's politics in the company, but just having an engineer actually be heard and whatever they have to say, like, it's also a great way to build the foundation of trust, which I think is essential in coaching, that they know you have the best interest in mind when you're talking to them in all regards, if it's retrospectives or if it's one-to-ones or any similar thing.
Yeah, and then like having a retrospective, it's kind of a group feedback session, but there's of course also like very direct one-to-one feedback where trying to be as specific as possible and coming with actionable feedback, right? Like, you did this thing and it would be great if you could do this instead because of this reason, or also very important, like, please continue doing that. That was very useful for the team, or something related to the code base. So yeah.
And that's a really good point, Kevin, to be fair. It was something I was thinking about earlier. I've got a team that I manage here internally, and I've done a little bit of management in the past. And one thing that's I've always been very conscious of is I hate the idea of someone asking me why we're doing things a certain way, or why a certain process is as it is. I hate the thought of essentially saying, well, because that's just how we do it, or that's just what we say we should do. I'd like to understand what the reason is that we're doing things, and if there's better ways that we can do it, then I'm sure we'd probably all agree that we should be listening to that and taking that feedback on board, right? And as Klaus said as well, that then obviously brings into the conversation the trust. The engineers then know that you've got their best interests at heart, whether that's a positive, a negative, or a neutral conversation that you're having with them. If they know that you've got the best interests at heart, then they're surely more likely to take it on board and take it to heart. So there's some really, really good points that raised there. Thank you for going through that with us. So something that I think we kind of need to come back onto is remote working. So I think there's, if I'm not mistaken, a bit of a mix in here in terms of people that like to work in the office more and more from home. Obviously, we've all worked remotely at some point. Everyone's been working since at least 2020, right? So we've all done it at some point. Do you feel that's a benefit? Do you feel it's a hindrance? Do you feel it not really matters when it comes to being able to coach your engineering teams?
I think, I found that the basic kind of one-on-one relationships that I found that quite easy to kind of maintain during pandemic or with extensive remote work. I was also in the situation that already the managers that I were working with were at different locations than myself. And so I didn't find that super problematic. What I think is, at least for me, with the kind of slightly kind of pullback position from the team that I found tricky, was that when being kind of co-located with the teams, they would kind of know a different side of me, and not just the guy that comes to the demos and are like putting in like demands in place, but they actually kind of also know me as the guy and the coffee machine and kind of the more kind of loose conversations. And that means that when we're then entering into to saying a team conversation like a demo session or something, that I have a little bit more freedom to kind of to say some more, because they know me and they know how to read it. Whereas if I'm just the guy that joins a video call every second week, then the kind of my input can come down like super hard. So I've actually kind of I think learned to contain myself a lot more during these kind of sessions, saying, well, because I can't really, it's more difficult for them to read where I'm coming from, and it's also more difficult for me to read the impact. So then I would actually prefer to kind of just like take notes, ask some polite questions, and then take it maybe one-on-one with the manager afterwards to influence in that way. So I think that have been a little bit stunted, as you phrased it, Jamie.
I think also we've recently had new hires come in, and that was more difficult during remote for sure. Recently we've actually started coming more in the office, because just this whole like having a culture, and I think it was Galina that mentioned just observing and listening. Like you can't observe and listen on remote necessarily, only if it's public channels that's being communicated in. But my experience was that it was not necessarily a lot of public channels. People are usually writing one-to-one in private. We use Slack. So just hearing what's going on, hearing the general mood of the team, I think that's become easier when we're not that remote. Listening in on just during lunch, how people are doing, especially as you mentioned, Mikkel, if you have a level in between, sometimes it's nice just to have informal chats with the people you are indirectly leading, and hearing if everything's going well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Personally, I'm also the kind of guy that likes to, chat with people in between meetings and kind of like knowing who those people are on a personal level, and then what's going on in their life, and are they tired, are they busy, are they happy, all that stuff, right? That doesn't happen at meetings. And getting to know their personality type, I think that's a powerful tool to use in coaching as well. Like my wife is a professional coach actually, and we talk a lot about personality types, and like really understanding different processes that happen in people's minds. And everybody's a bit different. Everybody acts differently when they're stressed or when they're relaxed, and getting to know a personality type just on this regular one-on-one or in a meeting that's about some initiative, it's hard. It's really hard.
And I think another aspect is with remote. So Medable is an interesting setup for us in Copenhagen, because we have a few people in an office in Copenhagen, and then the rest of the company is remote. It's a US-based company, but we have people all over the world. And so my team is a mix of people that are in the office, and I usually go to the office, and then there's also people that are remote. I think like with when everybody's remote, you're kind of on the same boat, and that changes the dynamic as well. So if you have this mixed setup, and I think with remote people, you have to be much more like proactive and hands-on. Often when people run into issues when they're co-located, they can just ask their neighbor, like, hey, I'm stuck on this thing. What do we do here? Whereas, people that are remote, they might, depending on the situation, they might be afraid to ask on Slack, or they take a bit longer to get to this point where they're comfortable to ask for help. And then you have to be a bit more proactive and ask, how people are doing and if they need any assistance with anything.
That's a really good point. That's something I've never thought of before. But yeah, if you think about it, having to call someone and have a one-to-one video meeting with them is probably more intimidating to people than just leaning over a desk and saying, like, hey, have you got 2 seconds? I just need help with this. So that's one thing I'd never really considered, which is really interesting. I think it's probably time that we come on some success stories. So this is probably the only thing that I mentioned in terms of preparation, maybe something to think about. You've all been in management and been in engineering for even longer now. So what are some of the success stories that you've had with your teams in the past where there's been a need for coaching, you've done something and it's improved? I can give a quick one to get us started if you like. I don't mind. It's obviously not technical. I mean, I'm not that technical. But something that I learned, it's probably very, very basic. It's probably a lot less complex than what you're about to tell me. But when I first stepped into management, I had a one-to-one with somebody external from our company, and they kind of analysed the way in which I was working with my team, some of the things that I was doing. One of the things that they realised with me is that I was telling a lot more than asking. So if somebody asked me a question and they wanted help with something, I'd tell them the answer, or at least point them heavily towards the answer. And one thing that I was kind of taught was to implement something where if somebody asks you a question, ask them what they would do in that situation. Ask them how, if I wasn't here, how would you approach that? And then we can sit together and come, it may be the right answer they give first time. It may be something that needs a little bit of work and we can sit and work that out together. But I think it's really helped to make the team more independent and essentially to help them to grow more quickly from like a professional perspective. But yeah, something like that, but a little bit more impressive sounding, please.
I think I really thought about this because I think it's kind of tricky. So when you're kind of in this kind of management position or coaching position, or call it what you want with your team, there's always so many different kind of parameters at stake. There's so many things that are influencing the situation. So to kind of to go in and point, I as a manager put this in place and that kind of flip the case for success. I think it's kind of tricky, and I mean I always look. I mean, it's the team that are doing the work. It's the team that are having this this success. So I mean, I think I can mention if some cases where I think we had some interesting conversations and the team kind of moved in the right direction. But I mean, I would never kind of go in and kind of try and like steal that credit from the team or the team manager. So I think one of the more kind of interesting challenges, like professionally, it was actually not one team. I guess it was more like 3 different teams that needed to work together. Was that we've been working on a product release for some time, probably like 1.5 years to kind of to build the software, and it had been kind of been demoed to customers and kind of tested and kind of run through. And then luckily we got a couple of big enterprise customers and all of their supplier kind of joining in and starting to use the product. And then that kind of brought us, or it meant that we needed to move from being this position where we're building like greenfield software that we're kind of should demo well, over to now we're actually kind of then also needing to kind of to support this go live, and there's a lot of problems in the software. So so we needed to totally kind of flip mentality. At the same time, also keeping on that it was still a young product that we needed to develop, but we needed to instill a whole new kind of capability and mentality of the team about also kind of supporting and fixing and hardening and engaging directly with conversations with the customers when they were having problems. So and there are really some teams and people that grew tremendously during that phase, and I think that we really came through it in a good way. So by kind of trying to manage that, or realize that now the kind of the conversation and the goals of the teams had kind of changed or needed to be adjusted, and I think we got through it in a quite good way.
Thank you, Mikkel, for an example. I think that's like a very great example of like coaching the teams, because I also experienced the same shift. Like I was also going through my teams through the same shift, and I think this terminology that is probably used there, right? It's a different mentality that you need to do between like building a product 0 to 1, like to the first customer, and 0 to many and 1 to many, right? So like 0 to 1, 1 to many. It's really there is a big difference over there.
So it's a different story, yeah, totally.
And I think that's a great example of like coaching the teams where they need to switch mentality. I want to share some example of coaching maybe individual people. So a lot in coaching individual people in our work is also about like career progression. And what I noticed, there is like a part of discussing how to go to the next level, and there is definitely like when there is a path to switching to manager, there are quite a lot of articles and considerations like, okay, how to establish you in a new leadership role when you change from individual contributor to manager, and there are quite a lot of resources to support you there. And for me, like one of the eye-opening was actually the path for juniors, like the very first step for juniors, meaning that majority of the like students that join the company, they're quite shy. They try to understand what is going around. They are building both professional experience, but then like their work culture experience. And then when they actually are ready to go to the next level, for quite a lot of people, it becomes challenging, because at this moment, they would want to take more responsibility. They would want to like be considered now as experts in some area. But like we all kind of form our perceptions, right? But the team has perception of this person as a junior. And then to help the person, to coach the person to go through that, like to teach them how to take the space that they need, how to speak up differently in the team, and then for the team as well to realize that they actually need to change their perception, that's the time when they need to start look at the person differently and like talk to the person differently. And like I personally didn't find a lot of like materials about that, and despite the fact that probably everyone goes through that, it was quite interesting experience for me in several cases, like really like working with a person, and like depending on personality, it can be easy or hard to change your own habits. And then like working with the team as well, like talking about you need to move to the new you need to consider like a person like at the person growth and like revisit your perceptions. That was one of the like I think the most experienced one, the most like rememberable one for me.
I think it's also, as you mentioned, Mikkel, when does it become a success story? Because to a large extent, I think if you're doing coaching right, it's not necessarily going to be a success story. It's just going to be a continual thing you keep on building on. Also, as you mentioned, Galina, just making small steps. This is not about putting out a fire, hopefully, because then you've not done coaching right. Then you've made a mess out of it and not really listened or observed to your team. So I've actually had a hard time finding a success story, but now what you mentioned, Galina, just seeing people grow little by little, asking them the questions they need to figure out to get to the next level. Like we've had some super strong technical players in my team. Was like, we need some soft skills from you. Like, what kind of soft skills could you get into? And now that person is doing workshops and doing knowledge sharing presentations. And of course, that's super nice to see people grow like that with just simple questions.
That's just answered one of my other questions I was going to ask. Because one of the things I was going to cover was, like, is there a point where you should stop coaching a team or coaching an individual? I'd imagine from what you've just said, Klaus, your answer is no, right?
It's a continual process, I would say. Of course, if everything is good, don't necessarily look into the bad things, but then we can look at, as Galina also mentioned, what's the next level? How can we take it? And I think Mikkel mentioned it on the retrospective. How could we take the team to the next level? Like challenge, if everything is good, then put some more expectations on the team, maybe.
Sorry, Konrad, I think I just cut in front of you there.
No, no worries. I was gonna sort of, I was also thinking about the success stories, but didn't come up with something that particular. But I think I focused more on the methodologies in my case, and I know we just touched upon something really interesting with when to stop. But maybe just to quickly touch upon the previous question with the stories. There's just this one method I really like to talk about and share, and it comes from my passion to climbing. I do like bouldering and climbing in my free time, and I watch a lot of like films and videos about professionals doing that, and you often see climbers just kind of like lying down on the ground and looking at the route and kind of like doing those moves that they can see on the wall, right? So they're visualizing that themselves in that situation. And I think I had a couple times a situation when people were struggling with something, and instead of telling them, hey, just do this, we'll be fine, right? Just have them make this exercise of visualization, or you could put it more like a risk management exercise, and see yourself, like see, okay, what are the cases, what are the scenarios that may happen, and see yourself in them and act on them certain way, like what can happen, what can I do, right? And then eventually when you are in this situation, then you're ready to go. You don't panic, you know how to act. And I think this builds a certain amount of confidence in people over time. So that's just this exercise I recommend people to do.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just if I would just kind of I would like to offer myself to share a complete failure, but I mean, so that would kind of take us into the when do not do coaching. So if there are more success stories, let's by all means let's talk about them first.
Yeah, so because Jamie, you asked us to prepare this a bit, and I was thinking about it earlier today, and yeah, as several people earlier, I thought it was a bit difficult to come up with a specific story, but I decided to just do something crazy and ask. So I just talked to somebody who's been in my team for several years, and I explained like I'm going to be on this roundtable discussion about coaching, and like what is something you think I've done well over like in those years that we've been working together. And I think I'll just read part of their answer like out loud and just quote it, because I think there's a few nice things in there related to the topic of coaching. So what they said was, I think it was very nice of you throwing responsibilities at me and trusting me with it and giving your input along the way when you thought it was needed. They gave me space to grow at the right pace and taught me to own the work I do, whether it's good or bad. And it like I was actually very happy with the reply because I felt like I did something well. But I actually think there's a lot of the essence of coaching in that answer. So I thought it was. Yeah, I'm happy to share that success story.
That's a brilliant way to share it, and I'm glad they replied. If they'd just gone offline and blanked you, it would have been a little bit awkward, right? But no, it's really, always really nice to hear stuff like that, right? I mean, it's sometimes it's difficult as a manager, I think, to get feedback from your team. You're their manager at the end of the day. It might be a little bit of an awkward conversation for them to have directly with you, but it's obviously something you've worked hard on, which is good to see. Mikkel, should we hear about your failure then?
Yeah, because I think it's a quite interesting failure. The background is that I came from a period of working with quite experienced teams. So with engineers and developers who had like a lot of experience and opinion on choice of technology or choice of methodologies, etc. And then at some point I kind of moved to super talented team, but also much less senior. And then after kind of working with one of the teams for a month or so, I was kind of saying, okay, there's something with the way that they're working that's not really working. So I decided to kind of like just do a like super open floor kind of a coaching session, saying let's talk about, and so instead of just like pulling like a Scrum 2.x down from the shelf, think let's do this the right way. I mean, let's talk openly about what are our problems, what are our challenges, what is it that we want to achieve, and then kind of really make sure that we kind of pick the right elements and kind of have a perfect setup. And so I was kind of laying that out for the team, saying, okay, like opening up the floor. So what do we want to achieve? And there was just like 5 young folks just sitting there like caught in the headlights of a car. And I tried to push and kind of nudge them and saying, okay, well, I mean, what last spring, what was like a major problem that we had? And there was still this like, and then one of them at some point just like quietly said, Mikkel, I think maybe you should just tell us what to do. And I think that it was spot on, because that was exactly what I needed to do at the time. I needed to say, hey folks, I suggest that we do this kind of modifications to our method. Let's come back to it next week and see if you don't think that worked out fine. Because they were so, and to an example of when not to do coaching, I mean, you need to have some kind of idea that the knowledge or the answer is somehow already present in the team, and that they're kind of mature enough and have enough background knowledge. So otherwise, it's probably better to go into teaching, mentoring, or putting the right frame in place. So that was my story of failure. It turned out well. I mean, we got I put something in place, and eventually we also kind of found the courage to and the kind of knowledge then to evaluate and talk about these things. So
I love your example, and it really it's very much refers to a conversation I had with my home coach, my wife here, about stop, and I was like, "Oh, never stop, coach people in career, day to day, and everything, right? Like, never stop coaching." Talking about, sometimes people just need a straight answer. I just want to get the answer and move on, right? So there was a line, right, where coaching is just not really helping anymore, and if somebody hears not a question, they will just explode.
Yeah, that's something I learned pretty quickly when I was telling you the story before about when I got asked to ask more questions rather than telling people. I think I went too far the other way, and somebody'd say, Jamie, what time is it? I go, well, what time do you think it is? And I was just like, I've really got to work out now what's going on. So, sorry, Klaus, were you gonna jump in there? No, all good. Conscious of time, is there anything else that we haven't covered, or anything else that people would like to bring up before we get wrapped up? All good. Cool. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll let you all get on with your evenings. But thank you so much for joining. I've had a blast. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that you all have as well. Again, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day. I know it's a busy role that you've all got day to day, so it's massively appreciated, and hopefully you've all took something away from it, and massively appreciate you bringing your expertise to the round table. So hopefully I'll see you all again very soon. And yeah, in the meantime, have a great evening. See you all later.
Yeah, you too, Jamie, and thanks all. And there's pretty interesting insights from all of you. So it's been
absolutely. Thanks everybody for inputs.
Thanks everyone.
Amazing.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. See you all later.